Brandon Burlsworth is this young man. He had just undergone baptism that day. Brandon protested to his mother when they got home because people were calling him overweight, but she comforted him by telling him that God had a purpose for making him that way. In addition, he didn't need to take what others had to say for granted, as only God knew what was best for him. Marty, Brandon's older brother, is 17 years older than Brandon. Marty became frustrated with his brother one day, since all he ever did was sit on the couch and watch TV, while stuffing his face with junk. Brandon had a larger body than males his age for a 12-year-old boy. Brandon refused to change and persisted in doing what he enjoyed, despite what Marty warned him about. Brandon remarked at once that he wanted to be just like an American football player on the screen. Regardless of whether Brandon was being serious or not, his mother simply supported whatever he wanted to accomplish. Their mother was the kind of mother who would support anything her kids wanted, as long as it was nice. Brandon joined the football squad at his school. Brandon was reprimanded by his coach for messing up the match, because it was his first time playing, and he didn't know the rules. Other viewers made fun of Marty and his mother, who was present at the time. Coach Tice, a high school coach who was observing, then went up to Brandon and gave him some advice, telling him that if he wanted to improve as a player, he needed to be the first to arrive at practice, and the last to go. Brandon's father picked him up after practice because he would be spending the night at his father's place. Because his mother could no longer endure his alcoholic father, Brandon's parents had been estranged for a considerable amount of time. Marty advised his father not to drink during Brandon's visit before he left, but it turned out that the man's drinking habit hadn't changed. When Brandon discovered his father was intoxicated in the morning, he quickly dialed Marty to come pick him up. Marty arrived and told his father to stop interfering with their lives immediately. After a few years, Brandon started high school and joined the football team. Brandon was always the first to arrive at practice, even before the coach, as Coach Tice noted in the past. Coach Tice questioned why Brandon often arrived early, while not being a member of the first team. Because he was only following orders, Brandon felt perplexed. Then, as he was different from the rest in that he had to work hard to achieve what he desired in the first place, he inquired as to Coach Tice's opinion of him as a time waster. Then Coach Tice said that if two players achieved the same thing, but one of them did so only after putting in a lot of effort, then the player who put in more effort would find it easier to retain his form. On that particular day, Marty and Brandon went to see the University of Arkansas football team in practice, and to speak with Coach Bender. He aimed to catch the coach's attention. Brandon's aim was to play for one of the NFL league teams, but in order to do so, he needed to play for a collegiate league club first, in order to catch the eye of scouts from NFL teams. For talented students they wish to recruit for their college football team, the college will typically grant scholarships, and that was Brandon's motivation for approaching Coach Bender. Unfortunately, Coach Bender had no interest in assisting Brandon because there were so many players vying for scholarships. Brandon, according to him, was still the size of a high school student. For college football, he was still too underweight. Brandon asserted with assurance that he could get even bigger. To cut a long tale short, Brandon received a scholarship to Arkansas Tech University when he graduated from high school. Although Brandon's family was overjoyed to hear the good news, he tore up the scholarship letter, instead of beaming with joy. Brandon apparently desired admission to the University of Arkansas, rather than Arkansas Tech University, to join his ideal team, the Arkansas Razorbacks. He essentially wanted to acquire a scholarship at the University of Arkansas. Brandon should not miss the chance to earn a bachelor's degree for free, according to Marty, who also quoted Coach Tice as saying he wouldn't. Brandon continued to reject attending Arkansas Tech University right up until the day of his high school graduation. Marty was upset with Brandon because, despite their family's unstable financial situation, Brandon persisted on enrolling in the University of Arkansas without receiving financial aid. Brandon didn't even consider how he would pay his tuition and living costs for the semester. Brandon heard his mother paying some bills late at night. Brandon then thought that perhaps his ego had grown too big. He had given up and was about to enroll at Arkansas Tech University, but it turned out that his mother had borrowed money from the bank to pay for Brandon to attend the University of Arkansas for an entire year in order to fulfill his ambition. Brandon expressed his happiness and promised to use the 1 year to apply for scholarships and pay back his mother's money. Brandon's mother did everything she could to sincerely support him. It wasn't far from home to get to university. The drive there only took about 90 minutes. He had support from his mother, but he also had support from his brother, who gave him a cell phone, so he could call whenever he needed something. When Brandon finally made it to his ideal university and was about to begin attending practice with the football team, other new players started making fun of him because of his big figure. He was informed by Coach Bender that he needed to gain weight in order to join the football team, but it didn't mean he had to do so. He might not be able to start, according to Coach Bender. Because of the limitations in place, Brandon, a walk-on player, was only allowed to assist in training the scholarship players, but he still had a chance to demonstrate his qualifications for a scholarship. Brandon's performance throughout the training session was the worst, which caused the squad to make fun of him. He was unable to move freely due to his excessive body fat. After training that day, Coach Bender approached Brandon and told him that everything was not about strength and size, but the foundational skills instead. He explained to all incoming players that the midfield players are the truly skilled players, not the front and back players who put in effortless training for their own benefit. Despite the fact that the athletes were walk-ons, Coach Bender didn't make a distinction between any of the guys. The same directions and workouts that the other team members received also applied to Brandon. Even though there were only 2 weeks left until the start of the season, other coaches questioned Coach Bender on why he wanted to devote time to preparing the walk-on players. Coach Bender then retorted that everyone had the same opportunity, and that he thought that if they gave everyone the same chance, they would discover hidden ability. Brandon was not given the chance to compete because he was not one of the players picked to take part in the season's game preparation that year. As a result, he was also denied the chance to receive a scholarship for that year. At the conclusion of that year, he should be able to receive a scholarship, he told Coach Bender after practice. Coach Bender was unable to assist Brandon, so if he failed the following season, Brandon would have to give up on his dream. He could only try to keep his uniform until then. There were still other people waiting to fill their little quota. Brandon's issue was compounded by the fact that his classmates still bullied him. Because of all the daily schedules he created and the fact that he saw his mother once a week, Brandon was regarded as odd and a mama's boy. When Brandon told his mother that he didn't receive a scholarship, she was unfazed by his feelings of discouragement and shame, and instead gave him encouragement. He went to practice as usual when he got back to college, but he almost hurt one of the players. Even though Coach Bender was furious with him, he continued to support Brandon, while the other players were calling him names. When the workout was over, Coach Bender approached Brandon. Coach Bender made the decision to assist Brandon with his weight loss because of respect for Brandon's tenacity. Since then, Brandon always started practice last and finished it last. His former bullies were fascinated by him as his weight continued to drop, and his playing technique improved every day. No one anticipated him to succeed when he attempted a one-on-one match against the best player among them, despite the fact that Coach Bender had not specifically instructed him to win, but rather to apply his technique properly. Everyone was taken aback by Brandon's transformation. Eventually, the other players acknowledged him for the first time. That evening, the bartender invited Brandon to have a drink. Even though they were all aware that Brandon didn't drink, his companions purposefully ordered a drink that contained alcohol. Brandon remarked that he only got the chance to study there for a year, but that he would always remember their hospitality after drinking 2 drinks. The atmosphere abruptly became awkward. The waiter suddenly approached them and informed them that the alcohol had run out. He was really disappointed and left there after realizing his friends were playing a joke on him. Brandon made the decision to go for a run in the pouring rain. After feeling bad about consuming the alcohol, his friend was going to leave him alone, but they chose to run with him out of guilt. They later reconciled after it. In the end, the games for that season began. The stadium may be shaken by the noise of their team's fans, because they were so numerous. Coach Bender informed Brandon that evening that the University of Arkansas had awarded him a full scholarship, allowing him to continue his training in academic pursuits. Brandon quickly informed his family of the good news. Although they did not anticipate Brandon to actually be successful in doing what he stated, his mother and brother were ecstatic. Brandon's eyesight abruptly dimmed in 1997 during a game versus Florida, making it difficult for him to perform well. He instantly informed his coach that something was wrong with his eyesight at that time. Brandon received glasses to improve his vision that very day. Brandon's teammates laughed because they thought it was funny to see him with spectacles. A few days later, Brandon learned that his father had lung cancer and was being treated in the hospital. Coach Bender advised Brandon to first go to his father before continuing the workout. Brandon responded that he would. Finally, Brandon and Marty visited their father at the hospital. Brandon received an apology from his father and a request to look after his mother. Unfortunately, Marty and Brandon's father passed away not long after they hoped for his recovery. That season, the Arkansas Razorbacks were struggling following many losing streaks. The Arkansas Razorbacks then hired a new head coach and decided to reorganize. What might Brandon do to get into the NFL? Brandon inquired of Coach Bender. Brandon's final year on the squad, Coach Bender advised him to give it his all to win the All-American, an honor given to the greatest athletes in many sports in America. Coach Bender had no assurances that the new coach would even play Brandon, much less win the All-American trophy. Brandon was warned not to hold out too much hope, because, despite their talent, fewer than 2% of college league players would be selected in the NFL draft. Brandon believed that all he had to do was play well, but Coach Bender emphasized to him that football is a team sport. Scouts typically only paid attention to winning teams. The following day, Brandon was still at the practice field far after dark when the new coach arrived. As that would be his final game with the team, Brandon claimed that they didn't need to reassemble the team, because he had a winning strategy. A new coach and a new strategy were introduced a few years later, as the Arkansas Razorbacks began to recover. Given that it was his final year of college, he knew he had to give everything he had to the squad in order to realize his dream. Then, after creating a summer camp to train his friends the same way he trained himself, Brandon consistently urged and coerced everyone to participate in the training. Despite the fact that his buddies nearly lost it at first and didn't want to bother in their last year. Since then, Brandon's coach has also appointed in team captain. Their efforts were greatly rewarded when they were able to win their first game that season, and, shockingly, 57 walk-on players surprised everyone by playing brilliantly as a result of what Brandon done. They kept winning, and their team's reputation grew with each victory. Friends of Brandon started to suffer from his habit. After 8 victories in 8 games and facing the finest team in America at the time, their supporters rallied even more than before. The Arkansas Razorbacks season of that year became legendary in the sports world, and Brandon emerged as the primary star who was considered to be the greatest walk-on in the annals of college football. It was finally time for the game that everyone had been looking forward to. With a narrow score difference, the game was intense. Arkansas and its fans were certain they would win the national championship that year, but Brandon unintentionally tripped a friend who was carrying the ball just before the game. Sadly, as a result, their squad dropped the ball. Their aspirations were quickly crushed. Finally, they had to concede defeat, and Tennessee continued to have the distinction of being the finest team in America. Following the game, Brandon went to his friend who had fallen and apologized. He instructed his friend to speak out, so that he wouldn't be held accountable. Although his friend insisted it wasn't his responsibility, Brandon didn't want to hold his friend accountable for what he did. Although falling is an inherent aspect of the game, it does not grant you the right to drop the ball. Even still, Brandon admitted that if it weren't for his obstruction with his feet, the ball wouldn't have fell. His friend pleaded with him to absolve him of responsibility for him, and let him suffer the repercussions of his error. When Coach Bender held Brandon, he started to cry. A few days later, when Brandon's name was announced as the recipient of the All-America Award, his family and friends were taken aback, because the news indicated that Brandon would be sought after to join the Indianapolis Colts as a professional NFL player. Brandon and his family were overjoyed by the information. Brandon attended the Indianapolis Colts mini-camp activities as the youngest player after officially joining the organization. Unexpectedly, Brandon was chosen to start the first game of the following season. He felt thrilled and strange at the same time since, in the past, he had always had to put in a lot of effort before getting what he desired, but this time it had come to him so simply. Because Brandon had to work so hard for years to obtain it, his instructor claimed that it wasn't simple. Brandon later reconnected with his coach and teammates in Arkansas. He received an invitation to his own goodbye celebration. He explained that he had to leave for Indianapolis the following day, and had an appointment with his mother that evening, so he couldn't go. As soon as he landed in Arkansas, Brandon acknowledged that he constantly longed home. After that, he began his journey home, and Marty was following suit. When Marty got there, he was startled to see some police cars parked on the porch and hear his mother screaming from inside. It turned out that the police had come to let him know that Brandon had been in an accident and had tragically passed away. Marty's world was briefly stopped by that reality, but as his mother yelled his name, he forgot about it. They had no idea Brandon, who was only 22 and had just achieved his ambition of joining an NFL team, would move so quickly. At the funeral, Marty explained to his mother why God had taken Brandon away so suddenly, when he had worked hard, and was just about to reap the rewards. His mother said that Brandon was the only one whose life had the solution to that query. He struggled to understand the idea that someone as kind and determined as Brandon had to leave the world so suddenly. But these feelings vanish when he learns how many people Brandon has managed to inspire. The University of Arkansas then awarded 18 scholarships, one of which went to a gifted walk-on player. Later, the Brandon Burlsworth Foundation was established to support kids who are blind and provide them free tickets to football games to inspire them. Marty also created the Brandon Football Camp to instruct in Brandon's brand of football. The Burlsworth Trophy, which was established in 2010 and awarded to the best player who began his career as a walk-on player, was created. Since 1999, Brandon's locker has been kept up as a memento for Arkansas Razorbacks players.